Okay, welcome back to the Modern Revolution. So glad you decided to come and listen again. Here in the Modern Revolution, we don't spend a lot of time telling you why you should listen to our guests. Instead, we want you to really listen. And if they say something that resonates with you, then we'll give you the tools to go learn about them more deeply. But rather than establish their authority by what they've done in the past, we encourage them to speak their mind and to establish their authority with you by the power of their own ideas. And so today we're very lucky. And so, Suzy Hardy, nice to see you. And I appreciate you taking the time with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Peter.
Now, in my preparation to talk to you, it's clear you've done many different things. And so I understand you are a multifaceted person. And as such, your approach to sort of your work and life is likely multifaceted as well. But I'd like to ask you to distill down sort of if you were to describe to us what problem you're working on in the world, what are you trying to solve? How would you talk about that?
I would say right now, because I
Hmm.
think the overall arching theme of my life is that I'm trying to help heal the world, which is quite a big task. But right now, my specific focus is on I want to help people reframe how they think about their mental health.
Okay.
That if they are struggling with anything
Mm,
in terms of mental health, that they are not broken,
yes.
there's nothing wrong with them, and there is no shame.
Yes.
And that you are not alone because I myself struggled with depression and anxiety throughout my life.
Mhm.
I saw mental dis-ease in my
Sure.
family of various things, various
Yes.
diagnoses.
Right.
But I feel like the world at large really, especially right now, struggles with anxiety and depression. And I have my entire life since I was 8 years old. I had my first panic attack at age
Yeah.
8. Didn't know what the hell was happening. And it continued to happen throughout my life. And I had a lot of shame around it.
Mm.
So I was a seeker. I went to the doctors and the therapists. I've done
Right.
multiple treatments and medications and natural supplements and
Right.
journaling, all the
Mhm.
stuff, all the woo woo stuff, all the Western stuff.
Okay.
And I want to help people reframe how they're viewing it if they're struggling and to offer support if needed.
So my opinion is that this is the human condition. Like, it's not that anxiety and depression are new. However, if we're going to call anxiety and depression your business, I'm sure business is booming, right? Like, we've taken a new turn in the level of anxiety and depression, and probably self-awareness about those things than ever before in history, in my opinion. So I don't think there was ever some bucolic time in the past that people were not anxious and they were not depressed. I remember listening to Dr. Andrew Wiles. I always pronounce his name wrong. Like Andrew Wheeler, whatever his name, the PBS guru and the who's become this champion. And he was talking about one of his physicians that went to Africa, and he thought, oh, I would see all these esoteric conditions out in the very urban areas of Africa. And the guy came back and he's like, there was anxiety, there was depression, back pain from whatever. It was very much the same. So, I mean, that work is obviously informed by your own experience, but I'm curious, did you know you wanted to do this work? Like, was it an epiphany all at once that you decided that this is what you wanted to tackle? Or was it incremental that over the course of your life, you then came to it piece by piece as you had one experience and another, that then you
Yeah.
decided, okay, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, it was well, I've always been fascinated with natural healing and wellness.
Hmm.
I have a mother who is an immigrant who I grew up with from Eastern Europe, who came over to the States when she was young, and she had an experience when she was young where her dad worked as my grandfather worked as a security guard in Manhattan for a big building where Solgar Vitamins, which has been around since the
Yes.
60s or 70s,
Uh-huh.
maybe earlier. They're old school,
Right.
and they were in that building and they would give away boxes of almost expired supplements to the people that worked there because what are they going to do with them? And so he would come home.
Right.
Yeah, it had to be earlier because this is when my mom was a kid in the 50s.
Hmm.
And my mom used to tell this story of like she started to break out. Coke started to be a thing, and
Oh,
all the
yes.
cool
Right.
kids were drinking Coca-Cola. And
Hmm.
she was going into puberty, and she started to get pimples. And my grandfather didn't know a lot about supplements. There wasn't the internet, right?
Right.
But he,
Sure.
I guess, knew enough, and he said, "Well, stop drinking that and start
Hmm.
taking these and see what
Okay.
happens." And she did, and
Wow.
her skin cleared up. So that kind of informed her that when I came along, she was giving me and my brother, home cooked meals and fresh vegetable juice, literally
Yes.
in my sippy cup, and I was not allowed to have the sugar and the junk food. So that was my baseline
Okay.
of health and wellness.
Right.
And then thereafter, like I said, I saw a lot of people in my own family have mental. That was our one thing. We're pretty good looking, we're pretty smart, but we did have mental mental issues
Right.
that genetically we don't have a lot of cancer or diabetes or anything like that.
Okay.
That was our issue, was mental stuff. And then I had experiences, my own panic attack, trying to find help for that. I had a back injury when I was a teenager, that
Right.
acupuncture, and it was a soft tissue injury from cheerleading, of all things.
Yeah.
Um, and doctors couldn't help me. I finally found acupuncture and massage, and that healed it in a month. And
Wow.
that showed me, like, okay, Western medicine likes to pretend they have all the answers. If I stuck with them, I would have been like I would have been in so much pain
Oh my goodness.
for the rest of my life. And
Yeah.
lo and behold, I needed a massage.
Yes. Right.
Go
Yeah.
figure. So this
So,
kind of informed these little bits and pieces along
yeah.
the way, showed me things, and then just my own experience with the anxiety and depression, which I actually think is a very modern issue. Um,
Okay.
I do think it's the world over. I think it's very prevalent in the United States and the
Yes.
West,
Sure.
less prevalent in certain places, but yes, the world over. Um, but all these little bits and pieces, I guess I was always a seeker. I guess I
Yeah.
always
Right.
wanted to understand more and to know more. I didn't just take things at face value. When I tried antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications,
Yes.
I wanted to look up and be like, okay, why is this working? Why does big pharma think this is going to heal me?
Right.
And when it didn't, when I still had the issues, I was like, so it was, that's a long drawn
So
out.
that's okay. So it's piece by piece, and then at some point in time, I mean, you've been an actress, you've had a career in various different ways, but
Yeah,
something was like, okay, this is so important that I'm going to organize, my professional life around it, and
yeah,
so all these led to some sort of transformation that you're like, okay, this I'm going to do this. Like this is
yeah.
how I'm really going to spend my energy.
Yeah.
Um,
So I was pursuing acting in Hollywood and
yeah,
voiceover. And I had my own massage therapy and energy healing practice as my side gig because I was
yeah,
always an entrepreneur in heart.
right,
Again, still trying to heal the world one body at a time.
very
And
good.
I met my husband. We decided to get into the hemp industry.
Okay.
We created our own hemp brand.
Mm-hmm.
CBD Fountain is my brand that I still run. So
Okay.
again, still trying to help. CBD helps bodies heal themselves.
Right.
And I got really burnt out on it.
Okay.
I created, a friend of mine called me a kitchen witch. I was creating salves and potions and lotions and things like that.
Okay.
My first product was a CBD body lotion to help. I still have back pain occasionally, to
Okay.
help my own back pain. And when it worked, I was like, oh, that's how my business was born. And I got really burnt out on it.
Okay.
Um, it's a crazy industry.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I certainly, I mean, you were in conflict with big business if you're in the kitchen, whipping up your product as opposed to somebody who's got a big factory. So I'm
Well,
sure there's a mismatch in terms of like, if you want to compete, it's probably an extraordinary amount of work.
let me just say, I did have, we just moved back. We were in Oregon for 5 years because it was very hemp friendly up there. We were in
Yes,
Bend,
right.
it was
Yeah.
beautiful. No, we did have a manufacturing
Oh,
facility.
okay.
I
Okay.
have other people. I wasn't literally making all the, I mean, I started in my kitchen, don't get me wrong.
Okay.
I started with crock pot and a dream, but
Nice.
no, we had our own facility, I had employees. It was too much.
Oh,
It
it
was
just
too
got
much.
giant. Okay.
I really, and then I realized, I'm going to still run my business. I burnt out.
Okay.
But totally burned out. I didn't know that was a real thing. I kept telling myself, like, I feel burnt out. And then I actually started doing some research. I'm like, oh no, this is a legitimate thing. Here's the qualifications. Here's the
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Right.
had all of them.
It's a diagnosis, right?
Yeah. And I thought, all right, well, now what? I'm going to still do that. I have to change what I'm doing. But I was always really passionate about psychology, mind body connection. And I thought, well, I think I want to become a coach. And they say, teach what you know.
Yeah.
No stress and anxieties.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. And I believe, like you studied at UC Berkeley, so you got a terrific education, obviously. I mean, Berkeley's
Yeah.
famous for lots of different reasons.
Yeah, I got
So,
a bachelor's in psychology, and I'd always thought about maybe I'll, before, when I graduated, I was like, do I stay this route? get a
Right.
master's or PhD, or go be an actress. And I chose the latter.
Okay. Um, so when you think about people dealing with stress, anxiety, depression, and you think about what's keeping them from dealing with it effectively,
Mhm.
what are the status quo factors in many people's lives that are preventing them from either accurately understanding what they're experiencing, like maybe they have these feelings, but they don't know how to name them, or maybe they can name them, but they don't know what to do about them. So, what are some like status quo parts of many people's lives that are preventing the movement towards the release of anxiety, the release of depression, or whatever would be management, whatever the right term is?
Yeah, I think it's, it's a slow creeper.
Okay.
The world has changed a lot, especially since COVID. That alone was an existential stressor for the world over.
Right.
There's six types of stress. There's
Okay.
mental, physical, emotional, existential, environmental. I'm missing one. Mental, social. I think that was six.
Okay.
That
Excellent. All
was an
right.
existential threat. We literally faced
Right.
death and
Mm-hmm.
disease and did lose people, and was just incredibly stressful, not knowing what was going to happen in the future. And so I think that it's a slow creep that we kind of, as we age and, go through our lives, and we're just like, well, I'm just going to get through. I'm just going to,
Right.
and we kind of put aside the signals that our body's telling us, or this, the stress alone from COVID.
Right.
I think we're all pretending like, we're back to normal now. We're not back to normal.
Right.
It changed everything. It
Sure.
changed how we relate to each other. It changed how we work. It changed how we date. Like,
Yeah.
I think so. I think we push it aside, and it's work actually to address like the stuff that you've been shoving down. It's work to be like, how do I manage my stress? It's another thing to deal with when you have kids and pets and jobs and
Yeah. Right. Right.
all
Life.
the
Yeah.
things. So I think that first step is a big one, is to be like, I need some help. I need to manage this. This is affecting my health. This is affecting my enjoyment of my life. That way it
So
was for me.
yeah, so in a sense, like when we talk about the status quo that people are experiencing, there's an escalation of things I think what I'm hearing is there's an escalation of things that are exacerbating stress, anxiety, depression, and that escalation isn't always noticed. And so there's like I think what I'm hearing is a creep towards a more and more intense set of inputs, things that are concerning, but there's not necessarily an escalation in the tools, of being able to deal with it. So when people come to work with you, if I recall I don't know if the name of your coaching is Serenity School, but you have like serenity in the way you talk to people about, as it seems to me, as almost an antidote to that, right? If you have serenity, you by default must not be as anxious or as depressed, or perhaps not depressed or anxious at all. But when people first come to you, what assumptions are you challenging in them that uh, they're coming to you to change. And so my guess is they have to do something different. So you must challenge them in some way. And what is the assumptions about their life, how they're feeling? What's a common assumption you challenge?
That's a good question. I was already answering your question in my head, and then I realized that wasn't the right answer.
Okay. You can give me
Common
two
assumption
answers.
that I challenge. Well, I think to even reach out to me, they already have to have that surrender of like,
Okay.
I need help. I need some guidance.
Okay.
Because that's the one thing I see in a lot of people in my immediate circles and my social circles, is like,
Right.
Americans are hardworking, strive, strive, strive. We
Yeah.
have all of the projects. And so I think there has to be some surrender of like, I need some help.
Okay.
And that's one of, I guess, the assumptions that I have to bring people past, is like, it's okay to ask for help. You don't need
Ye-
to know how to do all of this on your own.
Right.
It's okay if you've been to therapy and it didn't work, or that wasn't the right person for you, or
Right.
like, that's one thing. I come across people that I've tried these things, and it's like, well, if you're still feeling like crap,
Yeah.
You got to try different things.
Yeah, I mean, my mother has a policy that she doesn't actually create any new friendships with anyone who hasn't been to therapy. She's just decided
Very smart.
it's just an indicator that somebody hasn't recognized their own, condition sufficiently that she just doesn't want to go through the process
Is
of
she a
becoming a person.
therapist?
No, she's a poet, so she's a very
Oh,
successful poet, and her disposition is that like the best students are the students that seek tutoring. And so, she was a professor for many years, so she's like that too goes in there. And in many ways she feels that's an analogy that you go to help to seek help to understand yourself, and those are the people that actually have the best chance at being healthy, even if they feel like, oh, I think the assumption that I think you'd be challenging would be the assumption that like it's not going to get better. Like, I'm here, but I don't really trust you. You know what? I mean, I know you tell me you're going to help me, but I'm just here because I'm at the end of my rope, as
yeah,
opposed to like a sense of, if they were there and they were hopeful, they probably would have, be further down the line of reducing their anxiety and stress. But I would imagine some people must show up in pretty bad shape, that like, hey, I really need a hand here.
yeah,
And the shame that you talk about, I mean, we're just starting, I think, to figure out how to normalize the notion of, hey, being overwhelmed, being anxious and depressed is not an indication of weakness. There's other things in which we need to help with. A person needs to help themselves with, and my opinion is collectively, it's nice if we help each other, a little bit along those ways. Um,
absolutely.
so before they come to you, they're existing in this state, for some period of time. So what do you think is keeping them from seeing those discomforts as less serious than they in fact are? Like, why are they accepting that condition for as long as they are, rather than see it as like, this is something serious and I need help? If someone knocked your tooth out, you go right to a dentist. If you had a cancer, you go right to the oncologist, right? I mean, but when it comes to these things, we're slow to kind of like, well, is it serious? What should I do? I mean, so what do you think is going on that people take longer than they should? My guess is you'd rather see the people you see quicker than they actually come to you. Like, it'd be easier if they're like, hey, when it starts, get to me then. But why don't people do that?
I think because it's uncomfortable
Hmm.
and because there's shame around it, and
Okay.
because we're not taught or supported that way in childhood. It depends on obviously our family of origin.
Right.
Um, my mom had a ton of self-help books around the house, but she never went to therapy. She could
Right.
have really used it.
Sure.
I did. I
Hmm.
did when I was in college. Uh, when I had my first panic attack at 8, she waited 3 months. I actually stopped eating because I was so nervous.
Oh my goodness.
My stomach was so nervous. I didn't want to eat, and I lost a lot of weight.
Yeah.
I was transitioning schools, and then I had a family issue. My father came to me and said, "Your mom's divorcing me. Let's go to dinner." And I was like, "Whoa, what?"
Whoa.
She didn't take me to a therapist. I probably really could have used one.
Right.
I didn't go to one until college on my
Okay.
own.
Right.
But I think that there is, especially for men,
Hmm.
I think women are seek out and talk to each other more about these things. I think men are in our society, at least in the States, Western culture, like tough it out. It's
Right. Sure.
changing. It's
Hmm.
changing. Um, but it's still, I think, tougher for them. They're just, and it's uncomfortable.
Right.
It's not fun to talk about this stuff.
Right.
It's more fun to talk about your hobbies, or, like where you're going on vacation. It's not fun. It's challenging.
Yeah.
But, they say sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's remove the Band-Aid, remove the bandages and whatever you're covering it up with,
Sure.
and bring it out into the light.
Yeah, I mean, I think you end up medicating one way or the other. So if you're in pain, you're going to look for some sort of medication, and different people medicate in different ways. Um, and I'm hesitant to say all, hardworking, obsessive people are doing that because they're hiding from other things in their lives. But there are some people who are using work as medication. The negative medications are more obvious. I mean, alcoholism and drug addiction. Um, I've often heard addiction counselors say, like, well, drugs and alcohol were the solution, not the problem. Like, those are the things that were making people feel better. And so that was a self-reinforcing. And so without language to know, like, what's your self-dialogue? Do you know how you're feeling? I think all people go through that. I think there's probably a difference between men and women in terms of learning to connect with, like, well, why do I behave the way I behave? Like, why? Self-reflection, self-understanding is something throughout history we've known is valuable. Throughout
Mhm.
history we've known that not many people do it to the extent that they should, and that those who do end up being like guideposts, right? Like, people who deeply understand their own experience and can talk and write about it are
Mhm.
guideposts for other people, much in the way it feels like you had experiences that unsettled you, and then you had experiences that settled you, and you understood, like, I felt bad and then I felt better, made a connection between the two, which I think makes you very well suited to be a guide. Because I look at, i'm getting I'm getting terribly old, it's true. So i
No.
as I head into whatever time of life this is, when I look at people around me, where I was the youngest person in many rooms at the beginning of my career and whatnot, I had like a nice quick rise in my career. That is very much not the case. I'm often surrounded by people who are meaningfully younger than me, and they're in leadership positions in ways that I'm not, or they're physician or whatever. Like, the world, I'm older than much of the world that surrounds me. Um, so when you think about uh, the gentle ways in which you can kind of move people along, and maybe someone's listening and maybe they will seek you out, or maybe they're listening and they're like, hey, can you give me something? Can you give me, like, what's a small behavioral change that somebody perhaps that is experiencing some version of what you're talking about, anxiety, depression, um, what's something small somebody could do who may not know where to start, but would love a little bit of relief from those feelings?
Mhm. So I mainly deal with stress and anxiety. Depression
Oh,
really
excuse me,
needs to
excuse me.
be, yeah,
Yes,
no,
yeah.
I talk about it. It's part of my journey, but depression,
Right.
you really want to seek a therapist. So I look at it like this.
Okay.
Depression, if you're, okay, this is my analogy. If you're driving a car
Right.
and that's your life and you're headed in the direction you want to go, you're going from New York to Miami
Okay.
or pick two cities, whatever. And you're driving along and your point of joy and power is in the present moment of looking ahead. Sometimes you have to look in your rear view and
Right.
sometimes you have to pay attention to your GPS. So looking in your rear view is looking in your past.
Right.
And if you're stuck looking in your rear view, which is depression,
Okay.
constantly regretting the past and looking back and the, oh, shoulda, woulda, coulda,
Right.
you're going to crash. You can't drive your car looking in, oh, sorry, the rear view's up here.
Right. Right.
And if you're constantly staring at your GPS, which is your future,
Right.
worried about, is it working? Is my phone going to die? Is this the right map? Am I going to the right? You're also not going to wind up where you want to go.
Right.
You have to be mindful of your past. You have to be aware of your future, where you're going, but you have to stay present. And so
Right.
that's the work I focus on. Depression really needs to be dealt with a therapist because there could be a lot of childhood trauma, adverse reactions, things
Yes.
like
Yes. Yes.
that. So in terms of where I start with people is, again, bring it out into the sunlight, is list everything that's stressing you out because it can
Yeah.
build
Yeah.
up, and it builds up as we age.
Right. Yes.
When I was single and had my one dog and I lived in my condo in West Hollywood, life
Right.
was easier. Now I'm married with two dogs and I have multiple businesses. My list has increased.
Right.
So you list out all of the things that are causing you stress.
Right.
And you list out, and if you have anxiety, the things that bring on your anxiety or what you're fearful of. I think anxiety is fear of the future, whether real or
Yeah.
imagined,
Right.
threats in the future. And then you categorize them. I have what I call a zone of control worksheet where you put in,
Okay.
you take your stressors and your anxiety triggers and what is in your total control.
Right.
Probably very little.
Right.
Your own actions, your own,
Yeah.
treat your body, things like that. What is in, you have some control over, and what is outside of your control.
Right.
Separate them out because we tend to think we have way more power than we do.
Okay.
And our brain is always trying to keep us safe and trying to protect us and thinking that we can control a lot more
Okay.
than we actually have the possibility to. So
Okay.
we make change, then I, help people make changes. Well, how can you reduce or eliminate the things that you are under your control or make them easier in your life?
Right.
And then how can you let go of wanting to control the things that are completely outside of your parameters?
Right. Well, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense to me on a variety of levels. I mean, one is naming things. I think, s- um, when you're unsettled, the first thing is to name what's unsettling you, in my opinion. Like, if you can't name it, then you're attacked by something, real or imagined, that does not have an identity. And without that, it's very difficult to know what to do. And and so naming all of the things that are eating at your energy, I think
Mhm.
helps you identify, like, well, who deserves attention and who doesn't. What I also think, it's not just the road to the reduction of stress and anxiety, but it's also the road to high performance. I mean, because if you're somebody who's just interested in how do I do more excellent work, learning how to harness your energy, I think, is a way to excellence. You can't harness it if you're treating everything with equal attention. Things need to be prioritized. Things need to be put in some sort of hierarchy. There is
Right.
the urgent, there's the urgent and important, and then there's the urgent and not important. And, there's lots of ways, I'm sure, that you name the different quadrants that help people very sophisticatedly sort through, their things. That makes a lot of intuitive sense to me, and I'm sure that your methodology is clear then, like, because it's clear to me. Like, I understand it in principle, even though I haven't worked with you in that way. Um, well, so it sounds to me like what we're talking about is sort of, you've had some experiences, it led you over a long period of time to, like, decide, this is how I want to spend my time. As you decided that, you then created, frameworks in which, perhaps things that worked for you, now you're teaching to other people. um, what if in the successes that you've had, and I know you've had them in a variety of different ways, is there something that you've succeeded in the past that you would like tied to your identity in particular? Everybody is, quick to say their family, but I'd like for something a little less, um, like, yes, we all should have that as our first priority. But anything besides, things that are related to that, that you're like, what, when people think of me, I'd love for them to think about this particular thing I've done in my life. Do you have anything that comes to mind?
I think because like looking over and talking about all the different things I've done in my life is
Yeah,
that I am a seeker, I am a risk taker,
yeah,
and I'm not afraid to challenge assumptions.
yeah.
Um, it's been an interesting life. I never thought I'd be doing all of the things. I just wanted to be on stage and be an actress. Oh, well, that's just so easy to accomplish. But I've done a lot of different things, and I think I approach them with a sense of humor.
Right.
Uh, I think those two things.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, courage is that we don't use the word the way we used to. I mean, courage, I think, because somehow or other, for me, when I think, adopt the language of, like, um, I don't know how I would describe it, but courage is a bold word, and we've sometimes shied away from certain, like, pushing people into bold positions. Like, we want you to be a leader. We want you, but the fact that, having courage and then having a sense of humor about, the inevitable ups and downs of, if you want to go and have courage and act in the world to do something, act meaning be a doer, you are going to have successes and failures. Can't have one without the other. So that is a
Mhm.
great legacy to be building,
Yeah.
in a life, because it will echo past, you know, um, your time. You'll be affecting people well past their time spent with you. Is what we liked. My grandfather was just a wonderful human being who loved people very, very well. And there are people who never met him, that love that he gave to us in the family actually, I think, extended through us to them, and that in those ways, he loved people better in some ways than their own fathers or grandfathers might have loved those people as well. So we sometimes dwell on the notion of, like, well, the Holocaust was so evil, so violent, it actually changed people's DNA, and we, you know people talk about that level of trauma echoing throughout generations. But I would like us to talk about, like, well, love can echo in that way too. Somebody very deeply loved, the things that are planted there can grow even beyond, beyond the lifetime. Some people are going to listen and they're really going to want to find you and learn about what you're about, and perhaps even come look to work with you. Where should they go find you?
Yeah, they can find me at my website, suzyhardy.com, spelled
Excellent.
SUZYHARDY.com. And if they sign up for my newsletter, they'll get an instant access to my number one stress-laying and anxiety alleviating tool. It's
Okay.
super fast and easy and very effective.
Excellent. All right. Well, Susie, thank you for spending time with me, and I appreciate getting to learn a little bit about your story. It was wonderful.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Peter.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to today's modern revolutionary, Susie Hardy. And like others we've talked to, she's moving us forward, not just for herself, but for all of us. And I hope that as you listen to Susie, that you're inspired, because I'd like for you to bring whatever you have inside you out to the world, because the modern revolution needs us all.